tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day. Well, the idea began when I was making one of my many abortive attempts to quit using. And I was going to NA meetings, and one of the steps in the 12 steps is to write a personal inventory. I don't know if you've heard of that, but that's the way it started off. I was going to write a personal inventory, write my story, and I got carried away with it, and I started adding things, and it very quickly stopped being a fourth step, at which point I gave up any need to feel as though I had to be completely accurate. It became a novel. It was largely based on my own experience. Well, I was really surprised. The book had been out for 20 years, and I sort of thought it was all over with. I couldn't believe that somebody wanted to try to make a movie out of it. First of all, it seemed to me that most of the story in the book takes place in fantasy. Like, when I'm fantasizing about how Vlad Tepes may have been, or about Beowulf, or about Cain and Abel, or these various things that are going on in my mind. It didn't seem to me like there was that much story to it. But it turns out there was. There was lots of story to it. The other thing I thought was that, well, nobody's going to believe this. You put out this movie about growing opium in your backyard. Nobody's going to believe it any more than they believed me when I was going through it. I can remember showing up at a treatment program and telling the counselor there that I was addicted to opium, and she laughed. And she said, "Now, all right, now what is it really?" And she could tell I was in withdrawal. And she said, "Now tell me the real story." And I thought, this is what moviegoers are going to think too. It seems impossible. It happened on occasion. I was never afraid I was going to get hurt or going to get arrested or anything like that. What I was afraid of was the excruciating embarrassment of being caught stealing dead flowers, because you don't steal them until the flower's over with, and it happened on occasion, and I felt like a horse's ass. I think in the movie there's a scene where I'm caught at it, and it doesn't even begin to convey just how excruciatingly embarrassing it is. Here I am in my coat and tie. I had used opium before, not often, 2 or 3 times. And my wife had gotten some seeds from a friend of hers, these poppy seeds, and she planted them in the garden, and they grew up, and they were poppies. And I'd had an old National Geographic with pictures of opium poppies in them. I said, "Damn, that looks really similar." And so Patty suggested I try slitting the pods, see what happened. So I did, and it was just laborious, slitting the pods, and you have to go very shallow. If you go too deep, you cut through the pod, and it drips down the inside of the pod. So you have to go very shallow, cut around the edge, let it bleed out overnight. It hardens and blackens, and then you come around the next day and collect it. Well, I did that, and it took hours and hours, and I collected it, and I smoked it. And by God, I got loaded. I couldn't believe it. I had been addicted to heroin earlier, so I knew what an opiate high felt like, and that's what I was feeling. It seemed impossible. It didn't. This is not like the Golden Triangle. It's not like the Middle East, like Afghanistan or anything. This is Seattle, and yet the plants do extremely well here. The only thing they need is enough water. They're very, very hardy plants, and if they get enough water, they'll produce, and they produce these pods. Now, getting the opium out of them is so laborious that it almost isn't worth it. Slitting, then scraping, waiting overnight to get it. And it dawned on me once that I had been addicted to heroin when I was younger. And the way you fix that up is you put it in a spoon or a cooker and you add water. And it occurred to me that, well, the stuff is water soluble. Why not just try blending up the pods with water and straining it out and see what happens? Well, I was right. It is extremely water soluble. And it's so much easier to just twirl them up and strain them through a t-shirt and drink it as a tea. And that's how I did it through most of my career as an opium drinker. And then I got to thinking, well, what the hell? Why bother twirling them up in the blender? And then I just started eating the pods. I also knew that the idea was catching on among people that I knew. It used to be that you could find poppies growing in people's yards all the time. And now every time I would drive by these yards, the pods would have been stolen. There's lots of poppy thieves out there now. I'm not the only one. And I used to drive along eating the pods and pouring the seeds out of the car window. And I would do it as I was coming back from wherever I'd been, coming home, and eating them, throwing seeds out the window and things. And then in 1991, there was a flood on Fur Island, and the dike broke and it flooded the whole area. And when the water receded and vegetation came back all along Fur Island Road, was just a wall of poppies up one side and down the other, where the seeds I had sown. And everybody on the island knew what they were and where they had come from, because what I didn't know is that everybody knew what I was up to. But I'll tell you what, in terms of buying them in stores, the very first place I ever found them was right around the corner here, at a place called Megan Mary Olander's Flower Shop, right there on the corner. And they would sell bunches of them, these great big pods. Somehow the florist supply places are still getting them, I think, though it's been many years since I bought any. When I was doing it was before the internet. And what I would do is find these florist supply places where I could buy hundreds at a time. Since I was doing it, it's caught on, and so it's become more difficult. But I was walking through the public market the other day. It's got to be a year since it happened. And I noticed that they're still available there, and that, I mean, in bunches. I can remember times when I would have to buy a whole arrangement. This is if I would be in severe withdrawal, and I had to have something, and I'd buy a whole arrangement just to get the dozen or so poppy pods that were in it. They do make nice flower arrangements, dried flower arrangements, but between 100 and 150. Yeah, which meant that I had to jump down, turn around to get enough for every day. I once introduced a friend to using this stuff, and I convinced him that it was real. And he took 6 pods and made a tea out of it, and seriously overdosed himself. I mean, not that he was in danger, but he got way too high, and he was throwing up and loopy and everything, and it was just way too much. That's the common reaction people have to taking too much opiate, is nausea, vomiting, loopiness, everything. When I was really cooking with pods, I needed 100 of them at a time. So the difference is substantial between 6 and 100. And it's because you build a tolerance to opiates very quickly. And when they were available on the net, one of the reasons that they gave for taking them off was the fact that they can be very dangerous. Somebody had died as a result of trying this after seeing the film, I'm not sure. But he did some poppy tea and he overdosed and died. I'm not sure it really helps to prohibit things. Americans don't do well with prohibition. They always find a way around it. And prohibiting something just makes people want it more. So I'm not sure that making them unavailable is even going to work, let alone help. They can be, but so can everything else. Aspirin can be dangerous. Part of the problem with poppy tea is that really very few people know much about it. They don't know how many pods to use. I mean, if my friend got sick off of just 6 pods, then the difference in what people need is really broad. And nobody there to tell you how many. There's no directions on when you get a bunch of poppy pods. There are no directions that say use 5 for cups of tea. And when you don't have to do it anymore, you don't. But at that time, I had to do it, and I had to hide it too, and that was the hardest part. Keeping it hidden and sort of, I don't want to go so far as to say living a lie, but not being totally honest with people either. Part of the deal was that I had to go out and find these things. And so I had to do in 4 or 6 hours what took other people 8 hours to do. And I was pretty good at what I did and was able to do that. But it took a lot of effort. And my wife was not particularly she was not particularly touched by my plight. She was pretty angry about it, and so I didn't get any sympathy there. I had to keep it hidden from her, hidden from everybody. The kids knew, because kids always know. You think they don't, but they do.
Are you sick again, Daddy?
A little bit. Don't worry about me either, all right?
Okay.
I wish I had that much energy now, or even just a tad of it. I don't know how I managed to, work and raise a family, go to graduate school, do all these things at the same time. I have no idea where I found the energy or the strength, except that you rise to the occasion. And I think it's not just me, it's everybody. You rise to the occasion. You do what you gotta do. Yeah, it was one of my first cases when I was with Children's Protective Service. I got a referral on this character that was reportedly sexually involved with his adoptive son, and I looked into the case. I had very little information, and it turned out that the guy who was called Bob Downs in the film was a snitch for the Seattle Police Department. He helped them. They were going after boy prostitutes, actually going after the pimps of the boy prostitutes. And this guy, Bob Downs, was ostensibly helping them. What he was really doing, it turned out, was trying to replace Big Vinny, who was the kingpin of boy prostitutes in Seattle. So his goal wasn't really the same as the vice cops, but they were protecting him. And they didn't really care if he was molesting this boy. What they cared about was his information, and so they tried to scare me off, and they did it they didn't arrest me, but they took me downtown, and they actually put that stupid light in my eyes, just like they do in the movies. And then in court, when they were testifying, this one vice officer actually lied on the stand, and the judge asked me afterward, what does Downs have on Sergeant Jorgensen? And I said, I don't know, but he must have something on him, because he was actually willing to lie on the stand for this guy. Well, I didn't finish up the case. I had to refer it to the ongoing services. My role was to investigate these claims of child abuse, and I substantiated it, removed him from the home, and I don't know what happened with it, but it was a real eye-opener for me. I had never done CPS before.
Hi, may I help you?
Hi, I'm Eric Detzer with the Child Protective Services.
I remember I used to think in the morning when I would look at myself in the mirror while I was shaving, and I would think that, well, I may not make a lot of money, but at least I'm doing something important. In those days, we could actually do something. If we could provide respite daycare to parents, we could provide homemaker services, we could actually do things for them. Now I understand CPS has gone a little crazy, and all they can do is remove them. Well, the state doesn't want financial responsibility for your kid. The state doesn't want to remove people's kids. And the laws having to do with parental rights have gotten stronger. So it doesn't seem like CPS workers have a lot of impact now, but boy, 25 years ago we did. And I felt good about it. I liked the job. I would have continued doing it, but I got something better. Right. The actor who played him really got the look in his eye. I remember at the time when I was dealing with him, I used to think about his eyes. When you'd talk with this guy and look at his eyes, you were aware that you were dealing with somebody who was not the same species as us. He had not the same feelings, not the same standards, not the same morals, nothing. This guy was an animal. And the actor who played him did a good job with getting that look in his eye. It was creepy, and I didn't like watching him, but I thought it was very well done.
Are you Bob Downs?
What's it to you?
We received a report concerning your son, Brian. We could talk about it here if you'd like, or we can go down to my office.
What kind of report?
Well, it's a pretty serious matter, and I can't very well discuss it through the crack of a door. You want to talk about it here or downtown?
You got any idea?
That's an old family legend. I don't know if it's true or not. I've heard it since I was a kid. When I was young, you know, there was the 1939 Bela Lugosi version of Dracula had come out, but vampires weren't the big thing that they are now. And when my dad told me the story, it seemed like he was telling me the truth. I still think it's true, but I don't know for sure. My father and I were on a plane once trying to talk to each other, and we really didn't know each other that well. You know, he was 46 when I was born, and he got to talking about this legend and about this curse that the family was supposedly under. And that's when my imagination took hold of it. Mm-hmm. The idea of being cursed was sort of his idea initially, because what I didn't know at the time is he was going through alcohol withdrawal. And his mother had been a morphine addict, and he was alcoholic. He was an only child. And then two of my siblings became alcoholic, and I became a drug addict. So it seemed like a curse almost. Mm-hmm. That's where that came from. I saw a link to it, and I Googled it. I can't remember what I Googled, but I found a link to that story, and apparently some DEA officer had seen the movie and had then Googled poppies and found that they were available on the internet. I heard that he had tried to stop it and wasn't able to. Like most people my age and my ilk, we had smoked weed and taken LSD and stuff in high school. And then when I got to college on the East Coast and was striking distance from New York City, I tried other drugs. And like most people like virtually everybody who becomes a late stage addict, I felt like when I first used heroin, which is the same as opium, I felt like, this is how you're supposed to feel. This is normal. Now I feel normal. I no longer am uncomfortable in my own skin. I now fit into the world. Everybody I've ever talked to who became a late stage addict felt the same way. They didn't feel like they got high. They felt like we felt like we finally felt normal. It presents me at my worst. It was, it's not a flattering sort of picture of me, though it's accurate. You know, I often think about drug addicts who had horrible childhoods, terrible home lives, poverty, and all this stuff. That was not me. I had every advantage. I was born to a middle-class, intact family. I went to prep school, college, graduate school. I had every advantage, and yet I ended up down here. And that the film shows me on the way down, and it was uncomfortable to see it. And it's something I'm not proud of, and yet maybe there's something to learn from it, I don't know. But it was not comfortable seeing myself on the screen. My name is Eric Detzer, and I'm the author of the book Poppies, Odyssey of an Opium Eater.